Hi everyone, it's Justin here, Voices for Voices. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode and our over 400 episodes that you have wanted us to do. If we didn't have an audience, we would not be doing this. So thank you for tuning in, listening, watching. Over 100 countries, 1,000 cities worldwide. Uh, Help us make it 200 countries and 2,000 cities. We have that big goal of still wanting to help 3 billion people over the course of my lifetime and beyond. And because of you, we've reached so many people already, and I know we can do it with your help. We are excited to bring this particular episode to you with our guest, Dr. Lyons. I'm just going to go over a little bit of her background, and then we're going to get into our conversation. So, Dr. Lyons, she works with parents whose children have autism, and she is a Yale University trained scientist, medical strategist, and autism parent. She's also the author of Autism and Functional Medicine Doctors. The Right Doctor Makes a Difference, which you can find on Amazon.com. Dr. Lyons, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here and to talk with you.
Absolutely. Uh, for those that don't know about autism, so there's the AUTISM, which is what a lot of people are familiar with. But for you, you have the AWEtism. Can you talk just a little bit about that and why you decided with the work that you are doing to almost like awesome autism as opposed to just autism.
Sure. So, my daughter was diagnosed with autism, and that's how I got involved in all of this. Before before having my daughter, I worked in the pharmaceutical industry, first as a researcher and then more on the business side. So I had a lot of experience in the pharmaceutical industry and the healthcare space. And then when my daughter was diagnosed with autism, I asked, okay, now what do we do? And the answers really were not acceptable. It was just like, oh, well, things just get worse, and there's not really too much you can do. And that just, as a mom, that was not satisfying. And as a researcher, as someone who worked in the healthcare industry, I was like, that's like, says who? Like, where's the gold standard approaches? Where's all the different clinical trials? And who's the thought leaders? And what are the doctors that are doing the research? And that's really what I got into. So I stopped work and I really was able to focus on my daughter and really understanding what is autism. And as she got better and better, then I was able to understand just how her body was really failing her in so many ways. Like we hear about autism, how, there's constipation and there's diarrhea and, there might be migraines and there can be problems with sleep. Like 80% of people with autism have sleep problems at some point, right? So there are all these challenges with the body, but yet she was so determined she would get up and still go to school and pretty much fail at everything she did, right?
Mm.
And get up and go to school the next day and still fail at so many things. And as she got healthier and as she got more control of her body, I could see just her character, her determination. And that's really when the word autism became AWE autism that way for me, because it was just like, whoa, I'm in such awe of who she is as a person that I need to think about autism very differently. And so then as I started educating others That's really the perspective that I have, where it's not trying to quote unquote fix someone, like fix their character, fix who they are. However, when there are different barriers that someone is experiencing, like headaches, potty training, right? Like there's so many things with the body that are not working the way that person probably likes, then that's really where it's important to understand the science, understand what can be done, and how to do things very logically and compassionately as well.
Right. I like the fact that your determination of not being satisfied with answers that you were given, just kind of the status quo of, well, here's this is just the way it is. I think that's awesome for our viewers and listeners to understand that they don't have to just, I don't want to say like follow the sheep, but go, follow the herd and follow, well, this is what I was told, and this is the only way it can be, and that it's okay to kind of challenge that at times, uh, because it's so important to give our children the best opportunity to not just survive, but to be able to thrive as well. Can you talk about how you started bringing in, functional doctors and uh, all of the different ways, the food, the nutrition, and how those aspects played a role in uh, what you were learning about your daughter and then autism just in general?
Sure. So to start with, challenging the status quo, it's really following your intuition as a parent, right? So when I was in those doctor's appointments, that's what, I'm being told. It just didn't feel right. Like it was 2013 at that time. So it was just like, there should be a better understanding of what autism is. It's 2013, right? Like this is so my intuition was telling me that's not right. And so many times parents' intuition in this autism journey gets invalidated. So like if I had a concern about my daughter, it was just like, oh, well, maybe she'll grow out of it, right? And sometimes people and doctors tell you that because they're hoping that that's true. Sometimes you do have to give some space, right, for something to happen. But it's really important for parents to trust their intuition for when they feel like something is off in their child's development, right? So sometimes it takes up to a year to get an appointment for a diagnosis. So if there is that intuitive feeling like, I don't know, that, follow that intuition. It's really important. And that's what I did. So I had that intuition of, no, there's got to be a better answer. But then what I did was I went to the scientific literature. So
Mm.
I very was fortunate in the sense that that's what I did in my academic career, in my business career, right? So I knew PubMed very well. So, and the
Mm.
first like year or two of my daughter's diagnosis, I would, get her to bed, which was not easy at that time. And then I would go and pop some popcorn. And my enjoyment was reading
Mhm.
PubMed and really coming up to speed of the different literature. So I paired my intuition with scientific fact. So it's not as if I just relied wholly on my intuition. It was just my intuition was telling me you need better information. So then it was like, okay, where do I get that better information? And for me, it's very easy to go to PubMed. I still had academic credentials, so I could read the different articles. Many of those articles, you might have to pay $50 an article. So it's not necessarily always accessible. But as I started reading more, then that's where I started learning about functional medicine. I started learning about, what is all the research that's been done on gluten-free and autism and all different diets, right? There's actually 8 diets that are commonly used with kids with autism to address different symptoms, right? So I wanted to understand all 8 of those diets so I understood, okay, what makes the most sense for my daughter, right? Just because a diet worked for one person doesn't mean it's going to work for her. With autism, the spectrum is so large that you can't just repetitively do the same thing for each child. And that is where things can get complex, is you really have to individualize things. So for me, I wanted to learn as much as possible, and I was going to published scientific articles and then creating a strategy and an action plan from there.
Wow. Uh, and you've been recognized by a lot of, say, organizations, HuffPost, uh, Cornell University, Whole Foods, the list goes on. When did those relationships or those organizations start to realize what you're doing, how important it is, and how they could help play a role and help blasting kind of the information and the research and the published articles and all the different pieces that you were bringing together.
Yeah, so part of it is just a combination of interactions. Other part is I'm pretty determined. So
Mhm.
it's funny. I was just, for some reason, when I was telling you how determined my daughter was, I started thinking, when you followed up with the question of, well, you were pretty determined, I was like, huh, I think maybe she's learned her determination from me.
Mhm.
So I am pretty determined, and I have no problem doing outreach and talking to people. And I mean, that's how you and I connected, right? So I reached out to you. So a lot of times then people are like, okay, who is this person? And I've had a YouTube channel for over 10 years. And
Oh,
then people just go and look, and they see my videos and the way I approach things. So spelling autism as AWEtism really lets people know that I have great respect for someone with autism. And it's also about making sure that their body doesn't prevent them from doing what they want to do in life. And I teach science. So there's very rare that you'll see my opinion on scientific videos. Over the years, parents started asking me to do product reviews. So, how's this supplement or how's that? So in there, I give my overall opinion, but in those videos, I break things down like, let's look at the ingredients. Is there any sugar? Okay, yes or no. So that's good or bad. Let's look at the formulation of the B vitamins. Is it methylcobalamin, or is it a cheaper version that the body then has more difficulty utilizing? And so I teach parents the science. And then at the end of those product reviews, I'll obviously say yes or no, but it's all based upon the science. And it's important that I teach parents how it is that I'm coming to that conclusion so that they can then do that for themselves. So I have a very science-based approach to educating. And I think that's really what resonates with a lot of people.
excellent. And not only here in the United States, but you work with people across the world as well. Can you talk just a little bit about that? How similar we are as human beings, while there are the differences, but from the United States to other countries, that with us being human beings, that there's a lot of things that are similar that you probably have seen over the years. It's not like, oh, well, if you live in this geography, there's this that, and if you live over here in this country, then there's this other set that there. are different cultures, but there are things that make us very similar as human beings, which makes the work that you do uh, really universal in a sense.
Sure. So I've worked with parents in 21 countries so far. So that's people have different diets, different food sources, different farming practices, different chemicals, different air, so there's so much differences that can occur from country to country. But in health, it's the body the body doesn't lie, right? So it's important to have that viewpoint of what is it that the body needs. Like vitamin D is very basic. So for some kids that live in warm climates, same in the United States, right? People who live down more in Florida don't have too much of a concern about vitamin D, especially during summer and even during winter. Whereas maybe in Michigan, right? Vitamin D in December and January is much more a concern. But it's important for the parents to know that vitamin D is an issue and then to, stay on top of it. So there's many basics to health, but then it's what is relevant to that particular child. And believe it or not, there are some kids with autism who are living in sunny environments, and for some genetic reasons, it's difficult to really get and utilize vitamin D. So vitamin D is important universally for everyone, and it's just important for parents to know what are these checkpoints that they should look at for quality health. Things like diet, yes, food sources are completely different, and composition of carbohydrates versus protein is different in country to country. But when the immune system is overwhelmed for whatever reason, and there can be many reasons, and in autism there's not just one reason why an immune system could be overwhelmed, it's important, let's say, to look at diet, right? So when the immune system is overwhelmed, diet becomes really important because you don't want to add to the problem, right? So that's when parents start to go organic, and they start to really look at, okay, how has my food been grown, and really looking at water hydration. What am I drinking that's in this water? Is there heavy metals? Are there chemicals in there? Those are all things that really complicate issues that are there already for the body. And so an analysis of that all has to be done, because there are problems like that all throughout the world. So I haven't found anything that is, oh, this only happens in the US, right? I have not found anything like that whatsoever so far.
Working with parents, I'm wondering, as so a little bit of about my background of uh, major depression, anxiety, ADHD. I'm kind of on the uh, lower spectrum of autism, where it's mostly lights and sounds and that really get to me, which people think I'm crazy. They're like, you got this show and you're doing this and you got the light and I'm like, as long as I'm focusing on something that's not the lights and not the sounds, I'm good. But when I can get overwhelmed and get that sensory stimulation overload, um, I am I'm just curious on was it always the way I'm trying to think of how to say so stigma with mental health, mental illness, and that stigma around autism, has that has that been a factor that, like, did you ever have like a hurdle to get over, to kind of just like get that conversation started uh with individuals that may be like, oh well, there's nothing I can do to help. uh I guess I don't know. You can explain it better than me, but I'm just wondering from a stigma. What has there been a stigma around the work that you've done? that you have to do like extra selling or an extra pitch to parents to validate, who you are, the work you've done, and the backing and the like.
So I think to talk about stigma in the US, like 10 years ago or so, and more, when my daughter was diagnosed, the occurrence of autism was much less back then. So there was kind of a novelty to my daughter having autism. Whereas in the past 10 years, autism is really front and center for many parents, for many schools. So I would say in the US, the stigma of having autism has gotten less. There's certainly still challenges, especially in school setting, getting accommodations, feeling okay to ask for accommodations. Sometimes with people who are more on the lower support needs, like daily living support needs, they might be hesitant to ask for, extra time for quiet in their school schedule, things along those lines. But it's definitely important to learn how to advocate for yourself. So for any of these, high schoolers or in college and even in the workforce, it's certainly important to have that good relationship with your boss so that the boss doesn't think, oh, you're not doing your work if you're not feeling good, or if the timings of meetings, sometimes it's better to have meetings in the morning when someone's body is fresh, right, as opposed to in the afternoons. And then when someone shows up maybe tired, or even things like when you have the lights down low, people just assume, are you paying attention? Are you sleeping? Like that definitely would have been the case 10 years ago. But for now, you can have that private conversation with your boss and say, listen, I sometimes get really overwhelmed by the end of the day. So if I have my lights down low, it's not that I'm not paying attention. It's actually I have the lights down low so I can pay attention. And you can then always even ask, is there anything you want me to do so that you feel I'm paying attention, right? So like this is where you get partnership. And you talk back and forth with a boss or a teacher, or what the situation is. As far as stigma in other countries, I would definitely say that there are real stigma for autism in a variety of different countries, and parents work really hard to help resolve some of these health issues, stimming or rocking. In some countries, that's really frowned upon. Whereas here in the US, we can kind of say, well, that's just what that person is doing, and that's how they're regulating. Whereas in other countries, that's not acceptable at all. So I certainly don't want anyone to think that autism has been universally accepted all throughout the world, because there are countries where it still has a high stigma.
Uh, one thing, as I was doing research for our show, it's coming across on your website. It really just blew my mind, and that is the 37% of children lose their autism diagnosis. I didn't I guess I didn't know that that was a a thing. I guess can you walk through kind of like that process of the scientific ways that you went to find that research information and those outcomes?
Sure. So that's one of the pieces of information that particular research publication wasn't available when my daughter was diagnosed. But that's the kind of information that I found that then completely changed how I looked at my daughter, how I thought about what her future could be, right? So, I had that intuition, there's got to be a better answer, right? And then I had the knowledge of, okay, let me go to PubMed and see what clinical outcomes occur for autism. And so back when my daughter was diagnosed, the research showed that about 10% of kids who were diagnosed with autism lost their autism diagnosis. And that for me, I thought, okay, nobody's telling me this part. This is important information. 10%,
Yeah.
yeah, it's small, but I got to take a shot, right? So like this is where quality information makes a difference. And so then over the decades, there were always, one or two publications that showed an autism diagnosis wasn't permanent. It was a small amount. And I think a lot of people don't want to get parents' hopes up, but I don't think that's in the best interest of the child if the parents don't even know that this could be a possibility, right? And so in 2023, that's the latest research showing that 37% of kids with an autism diagnosis lost it. And they were at Boston General, so the hospital in Boston, Massachusetts, well-respected hospital. And so they looked at kids that were diagnosed with autism, and then several years later, did they still have the autism diagnosis? And 37% lost it. And they didn't really quantify exactly what each parent did. So like, vitamin D status, like really basic elemental health. I would love if they, got into those details. They didn't, but they did. One of the things that they showed was that as a child was starting to improve, the parents scaled back the like ABA therapy and more that behavioral aspect of therapy, which is really the only thing that insurance pays for nowadays. So it was really contrary to what I was expecting that moved the needle, right? Because if that's what insurance pays for, that's what should be the best, right? And it's not. So
Mhm.
as children are getting better, then they scale back on those types of therapies. But it's important for parents to know that this is a possibility, and then to start saying, okay, who has that knowledge and how can that potentially apply for my child, right? 37%. Now you definitely got to take a shot at that, right?
Oh yeah. Um, I'm very curious in, do autism diagnoses only happen when a person is younger? I've run across, even with myself, uh, growing up being in my 40s, and uh, autism really wasn't, I don't know that it was really looked at or tested in the 80s and the 90s as much as it is now. And I've had a lot of people come to me and in a not nice way and say like, you're lying, you're full of it. If you weren't diagnosed when you were in your earlier years, how are you just finding this out and when you're in your 30s? Can
Right.
you speak maybe a little bit like your knowledge of that, if there is any research or anything about that?
So, just to say, it can be possible to not have been diagnosed as a young child with autism and to be diagnosed later in life. That is happening more and more now. Many times, when a child is diagnosed with autism, parents start looking at themselves, and sometimes that is, the motivation and the change that is needed for a parent to say, maybe I should explore diagnosis. It's not a linear relationship, so I certainly don't want anyone to think that
Mhm.
if they have a child with autism, then they have to be autistic themselves. That's not the case, but it just gets parents to reflect upon themselves a bit more. So it's totally possible to be diagnosed later in life. Back in the 80s, there wasn't persistent, consistent screening for autism, right? Because the numbers were so rare. Whereas now kids are routinely being screened for that. So in the well child visits, that is something that a pediatrician is looking for so that it can be flagged. An autism diagnosis can be made as early as 18 months. So
No.
um, quite young. I will say there's a new piece of research that was just published last year that looked at the genetics of someone who was diagnosed with autism when they were a child and someone that's diagnosed with autism later in life. And the genetics are different. And so,
No.
yes, this is so what really complicates this situation is the one word autism that is used to apply in so many different situations, right? So someone with autism can be fully verbal. They might have difficulties with, relationships and speaking, having that kind of back and forth conversation, maybe some stimming, but they're still able to hold a job or something like that. Whereas on the other end of the spectrum, profound autism is when someone needs 24/7 care. They can't feed themselves, they can't cook for themselves, they can't walk across the street or drive. So we have this one word that is really trying to describe very different people and different symptoms and experiences. So for someone to say that just because you were diagnosed in your 30s, it's not truly autism, that's not correct for them to say. It's not factual. And autism really does impact people differently. So you can certainly have an intense, sensory component to it, but yet still be verbal. That's certainly a possibility in autism.
Great. Thank you so much for that. Can you talk as we're winding down our time together today on this episode? Can you talk about the published book, Autism and Functional Medicine Doctors, The Right Doctor Makes a Difference? What made you want to be an author and want to put information out to literally the world? Because anybody can purchase just about no matter what country they're in. Can you maybe just talk a little bit about that and then follow up with any more of your branding that you want to share with our viewers and listeners?
Sure. So I started working with parents one-on-one many years ago. And when doing, they're all across the United States, and then it's spread to all across the world. And of course, one of the top questions I get is, okay, who's a good doctor? Who should I work with? Right. And I went through that same process for my daughter, and I'm a very thorough person. I think you can probably tell that about me already. So nothing is like slipshod. We don't do anything, halfway. We either do it very well or we don't commit and do it. So I wanted to understand doctors and autism so I could get my daughter the best care. And then when I worked with clients, I had the same approach. So I knew across the United States, all right, who are the good doctors? So regardless of where my client was, we could start to assemble a really good healthcare team. And then the wait list grew to work with me. It grew more and more. And I wanted to make sure that parents could still find the really good doctors. And so that's what made me write the Lyons report in 2020. So that was when that book was first published. And then in 2026, we are releasing an updated version. And
Awesome.
back in 2020, there was about only 70 doctors. And so functional medicine has evolved and more doctors are involved in the field, although some of the really good ones are retiring or have retired already. So in 2026, the new book will be published, and I can come back. We can talk about
Yeah.
doctors and healthcare more. But that's why I wrote the book, so that a parent could spend a small amount of money to really get good information about who it is that they should be working with, because I really want to make everything much easier and accessible for parents going through the same thing that I went through.
Wow. Uh, Thank you for that. I'm glad you're doing an update here this year, and we'll definitely have you back to talk and explore uh, that that piece of work that you're doing. And I think it's great that you didn't, and you're not just stopping. Like "Eh, I did this thing, and now I'm stopping. Like you said, like you're going either go all out or you
Yep.
just don't. And I'm kind of the same way where it's like I I can't do something halfway. Like if I'm going to get started, I have to finish it,
Nope.
and sometimes that leads to some burnout and things. Uh, but that's great. Um, any other ways people can learn about the work that you do, your website, and you have a YouTube channel, how people can find you and subscribe and all those great things?
Yep. So I'll definitely send you all the links. So
Okay.
can do that. They can first check me out at YouTube. I've had that channel over 10 years. So there's lots of science if parents want to learn about that. They could come check out navigatingautism.com. That is the company that I have that really helps parents navigate through this whole process. We have a platform that is flexible spending approved. So we really try and educate the parent so they can make the best decisions for their child. And then, yeah, you can find me on a variety of different social medias.
Excellent. Well, Dr. Lyons, thank you so much for taking time out of your day, spend with us and impart knowledge on the work, the so important work that you have and continue to do. And we look forward to maintaining a kind of a relationship, be able to follow how things are going and at certain milestones. We do definitely want to have you back and share because it's so important the work that you're doing uh, and there may be others that are doing work like yours, but the work that you're doing is so important and attacking it from so many different angles, from the nutrition to the sleep, a whole gamut. And that is really how we think that everybody should be, treated, evaluated, looked at, like, okay, well, why am I feeling like this? Is there certain things that I can do to help? And sometimes it goes into autism, and to know that that's just amazing. The book that you have in 2020 coming out in 2026 because uh, and I'm just thinking about the referrals as well. It's sometimes taking up to a year to or more to get on the list, and some people just lose faith and like, well, I'm gonna have to wait a year to see a doctor, and are they going to actually help in the best way? So thank you so much, Dr. Lyons, for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And thank you to all our viewers, our listeners here in the United States and across the world. We're grateful to have you with us. And until next time, this is Justin Allen Hayes, and we had Dr. Lyons on our show today. And give a big thank you to her for spending time with us. And we hope you not only have a great day, but we hope that you celebrate all the voices that we have, whether that's through art or through music or speaking or playing an instrument or a sport. And we like to say to be a voice for you or somebody in need. And we'll see you on the next show. We'll see you next time, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.